Welcome to the Layman Seminary. We're continuing a series on basically wherever I'm working on my paper in real time. I'm calling it Analyzing 1 Corinthians 15 by my chart for a seminary paper. And I made one video already and doing this in real time. And I've changed my structure a whole lot. And I'm going to show you what I did in this PowerPoint. And since I made this PowerPoint, I've actually made more changes. But I'm doing this video to motivate me because to get my stuff turned in because it's going to be due Saturday and today's Wednesday. So let's move forward here. Okay, so right here, what I'm doing in this PowerPoint is I'm trying to make sure that my footnotes are accounted for. Okay, they're not in the right format yet or anything like that. But so the first statement I have is: does one have to continue to believe and behave in harmony with the gospel to remain saved or prove that one is truly saved? And so this I've scrapped. Okay, I'll tell you that in advance. But this is what I initially said. Those that think one must continue to remain saved are typically called Arminian. Those that think one must continue to prove you are saved are typically called Calvinists. These categories are no longer helpful, in my opinion. Some prefer the term conditionalist versus unconditionalist. But if unconditionalist is another term for eternal security, then it does not distinguish traditionalists and provisionists from the main view within free grace theology. So it's a good note, but I've scrapped it. Second one, Calvinists that take the warnings for unbelievers, yet believe that being assured of one's salvation motivates one to serve God. In addition to that being an awkward sentence, I think I smoothed it out. I made some changes. I've actually dropped the word Calvinist in the majority of the paper, and instead I'm using a truth and b truth. See how that works. But so this is the footnote where it says, see Bob Wilkin, the new assurance, assured, not assured. There's the link for that. Wilkin links an article titled The Relationship Between Warnings and Assurance. Don't Fumble It by Andrew Wilson. And it's at the Gospel Coalition. The link's there. So there's the Wilkin article. Here's the Wilson article. And then, so my third footnote. One of the most recent commentaries depends on the 2017 argument of Wilson. So number 3, Wilson also wrote the warning assurance relation to 1 Corinthians is cited in ESV expository commentary as a basis for the argument of the 2020 commentary. See footnote. There's that resource right there, the ESV commentary. Here's the actual quote. The second, let's see right here. This is another example of the letter you both assuring and warning Corinthians. And then you got a footnote 316. And then this is where it says confer Wilson warning assurance. Okay. So here's that book. I think it's like $90. So I don't have this one, but you can read about it in this journal article. So the fourth footnote, but if they don't persevere into their life, it proves they were never saved. That's Thomas Schreiner, 1 Corinthians, making a reference to that. So there's that reference. And here's actually his quote. He says, this is concerning 1 Corinthians 8. I suggest it's not Paul's purpose to arbitrate on the question in the verse before us. Talking about especially called to salvation, persevere to the end. He speaks pastorally to the Corinthian knowers, asking them if they are willing to act in such a way that a brother or sister will be damned. If someone actually falls away and apostatizes, that person gives evidence that he or she was not a genuine believer in the first place. That's his claim. Of course, I'm free grace, so I disagree. Perhaps Paul speaks phenomenologically using the language of appearance for the sake of his pastoral admonition. In other words, he's speaking to them as if they are saved because they look saved. And he's speaking as if a pastor does. So D.A. Carson's work probably inspired this approach, Reflections on Christian Assurance, which is often quoted by recent Reformed commentaries. 5. There's that resource there. Here's it in the journal. There's the actual one. And so this is where he starts interacting with about Zane Hodges and free grace stuff. It says, in America, the basis of Christian assurance is erupted as distinguishing banner of a small but ferocious segment of evangelicalism, of a great evangelical society and things like that. Okay, so the to counter um Carson, Zane Hodges wrote an article called "The New Puritanism," and so that's what I'm talking about right here. The New Puritanism, Part 1, Carson and Christian Assurance. It's where that article is, and here's that actual article. And then I also say Jody Dillow, the Free Grace Alliance. So you got GS, right, Wilkin. Now you got FGA right here. I say also exposes the presuppositions Carson's in a chapter on defense of free grace. It's also in Final Destiny, but I went ahead and quoted this one as well. So there's that resource. And I didn't actually quote the quote, but it's a whole chapter, so I guess it's all right. This is the ESV commentary that claims people are only addressed as saved, but are not necessarily says the present status is as saints. So that's in the Sally again. So this is where he's calling them saints, even though later on he's doubting. He's basically saying that you can't know that everyone in the audience are not believers, kind of like what he's saying. Again, he calls them saints here. Those sanctified in Christ Jesus, called to be saints. And then he even says this. He's talking about progressive sanctification. In the sense, sanctification is distinct from both justification and glorification. Those systematic theology categories are valid and important. But in the Bible, sanctification does not always refer to progressive sanctification, or I use the term experiential. New Testament usually refers to definitive sanctification, in other words, positional. And then ultimate would be glorified body. In the future, ultimate sanctification. He's using the term ultimate. So he says, Paul describes the Corinthian church as both sanctified in Christ Jesus and called to be saints. So this is the distinction between position and experience. Some people put, whenever Luther said saint and sinner, I can't remember the Latin phrase, but simultaneously saint and sinner, that was probably the first articulation of this concept. But of course, the Bible, first century, would be as well. So anyway, Orpeza, I've corrected the spelling on it, believes you can lose your salvation, argues that the people are saved. And I think that's typically the case, is that if a person believes you can lose your salvation, they're going to take the passage as referring to actual believers because it helps their case. I mean, it doesn't help their case to say, well, they're not really saved. But, if they can identify those things by context, that's great. So here's that resource. This guy's written a whole lot on apostasy, so he's one I'll study in the future. So he makes a reference to final salvation here. Final salvation will be the inevitable outcome of those who are in Christ. That is, those who belong to and remain in the corporate body, maintaining spiritual fellowship with them. So you got that idea that you got to stay in Christ. What does save mean in 1 Corinthians? So this is footnote 11. When one encounters words, it is helpful to ask save from what determines contextual meaning. And then I had a footnote here, which it was talking about a new topic indicated by day and the Greek and stuff. I moved all this around. I may even scrap it. It's just not necessary, and the paper needs to get down to 10 to 12 pages. It was long in this one, and it's actually gotten longer since then. But I have streamlined it a lot, and I'll show y'all later on in the next video probably what that one looks like. Okay, so this is a reminder that this was a Greek issue for my notes to go in and clean that up for me. Footnote 12 identifies salvation, terms. It's like choose a source. What am I going to find that explains how it is? Am I going to use the BDAG lexicon? What am I going to use here? I pick something. So I said this is a good place to invoke the categories often called the 310 salvation. Make a reference to Schofield, wherever that phrase, the 3/10 of salvation, shows up early on, 1917. And then the three aspects show up early in 1926 in this version of Major Bible Themes by Chafer. So there's Schofield. Here's the actual quote from Schofield: salvation in 3 tenses. Sorry. Here's Chafer, Major Bible Themes. Only one aspect of sanctification out of the three deal with the problems of human experience. So this is where the experiential shows up. Okay, so this footnote right here, this is where I'm going to put in some illustrations. I probably will just keep them in the footnote. Causation versus correlation, kinetic and potential, automatic versus semi-automatic. Some of y'all probably have heard me use those. As visualized above chart, there are three main options for what saved means this passage. Henceforth, identification, three possibilities for any given concept would not be given, but will be explained where needed. I think I eliminated that note. This others argue that a preservation could continue the gospel is not truly saved. For example, see the latter in the Sally, which I've already quoted. So I'm going to be reducing and making these into short footnotes at some point. But the other thing that I did was originally in the first version of the paper, the one that I walked through in the first video, I was talking about those that think you can lose salvation and those that think you cannot lose your salvation. And then the ones that cannot, I was basically talking about the perseverance of the saints, the more the Calvinistic type. Well, in order to streamline my paper, I'm going with the approach of just dealing with those that think you got to persevere to the end. So I don't have to prove you're saved. That's a good point. To prove that you're saved, not to maintain your salvation. So I've kind of limited it between Calvinistic interpretation and free grace interpretation. And I can go back in the future and do one on the Arminian interpretation. So that helped me limit the scope because I had too much before. And I think it helps with the flow as well. So let's see. This is the quote, I think, from, this is Nasali. If they don't persevere, then they believed in vain. And he takes, even though he says vain can be without careful thought, without consideration. And he says, either this means that they believed in vain and was not true, or it was in vain because it wasn't genuine belief. So of course he's going to go with that one. And then right here, you see this statement: final salvation, however, will not come without perseverance. These are statements like this that make it unclear, like, okay, and I think this is actually Schreiner, is you're making it sound like final salvation is conditioned on perseverance. But of course, the Reform would typically reject, except Schreiner is Neonomian, so he has a different view of things. He basically argues that, at least according to how Dillow sees it, is that perseverance would be like the results of positional salvation, but it's also the condition of final. So I disagree with that, but anyway, that's for another time. Okay, this is a footnote 19. Let's see, other options: the present tense, some Greek options that I'm probably not even going to include. So I was like, all right, so where am I at on my commentaries here? This is bestcommentaries.com. So we got Nasality here, 2020. We got Schreiner, 2018, and Arpisa, 2017. But another one that's kind of Greek intensive is the Zondervan Exegetical, and that's 2018. So I'm going to interact with that. So here we are with that. And so this is what he says. Paul can speak of salvation in past, present, future tenses, but here the present tense, passive, reminds us that God's grace continues to save in order that in the future this salvation may be complete at the judgment day. I don't like how sloppy that language is in my personal view of things, especially when you get to verse his footnote on 20. He actually look at the, I'll show you right here. It says, for this reason, in verse 2, Paul could see the gospel as instrumental through which you are being saved and maintaining the salvation of the believer. So it almost speaks as if you have to maintain your salvation, the believer. As far as I know, this guy's reformed. I'm not sure. Okay, so this is a footnote to remind me to caution it etymology, like when studying the word gospel. So I may write something there. 22 right here. This is talking about the Hebrew words and the Septuagint and all of that. And this is just a reminder that I need to list some lexical support maybe for that. May not do that. I don't know. Just depending on that. 23, this is where got some footnotes about different commentaries that define the gospel. I color coded these so that I know which ones are coming from at that stage. Of course, I'll change that later on. This is back to Gardner. What he's got the footnote right there for gospel. And he's got this article here for gospel. And back to the maintaining salvation of the believer passage. And so this support this is like, okay, do I need to support these claims, or remove it? It may not be necessary. Historical fact, resurrection, believer resurrection. I think I came through and I cleaned up these, combined some of these. So here, a lot of these are coming from Nesali, as far as Anastasis, Necros, and then also Garland, a couple other resources and stuff that I could go into. It just made me aware of, all right, if I want to talk about these things, I can go into these. A lot of this I'm going to scrap. So here's resurrection, anastasis. Here's resources if I wanted to go in more detail about those. Same thing with Necros, Badag, quoted there. Check Constable's notes. I was telling myself, and I think this is not Constable's notes. What is this? This is still the ESV commentary. So it's talking about the Greco-Roman pagan baggage that the Corinthians would have had. Here's some footnotes, and these are actually from Constables, where like he quotes Keener, Fee, Robinson, and Plummer. And so I wrote my note to research these. I'm running out of time, so some of this I'm just going to have to let go. A lot of it concerning background information. So there's a note for me to research. Again, trying to get support for these claims. Same thing here. Like I said, if I don't think I need to support it, or I think I can cut it, then I will. Again, Sally's footnote here, 36, paralabate, meaning to accept it, and the options for that. Here's Ezekiel, and then Campbell, basics of verbal aspect, if I need to go into more detail there. Here's again Nasali talking about how he understood those terms. This is Gardner on the gospel and how he understands received, the perfective aspect of the Greek. Let's see here. This is talking about how to understand stand and the different ways that it's being used. Talking about the perfect use of stand and from Gardner. More needing to support certain things, support it, qualify these statements. Same thing with these. Same thing with this. 46. Let's see here. Okay, this is where I was doing my Greek stuff, and I got some resources about the particular words. I want to clean all this up and make this a lot better, but this is a note for me to research it. That's back to Nasali. Research Bruce, I could. So looking back to the saving gospel, that's what this commentary said. Just keeping to that here. The conditional clause, if you hold fast, looks back to the saving gospel that they received and have believed. So this commentary is taking it as they actually believed, or at least in this part it did. But then it says not clear if he doubted salvation. There's things like this: believed in vain. What does it mean? So it's like, okay, I need to track down this stuff. That's my note for me. More of the support stuff. Support that. What does believe in vain mean in context? So Nasali's quoting the Badag here. I can trace down the Badag on that. Same thing there. Couple other things like Kistemaker, Shiner. I know I didn't spell his name right. I'll fix that later. Some notes right here where I'm just quoting them from that, and I'm tracking all this down. So this is where I took a break. I was like, I need a break. I can't work on this right now. Far as put in certain things, and I still got little footnotes here, like things I already did. So I didn't put all the resources in from this point forward, but I got a couple other things for me to go into. I got some Greek words, some Greek stuff, commentaries that I can hunt down and resources and check, or I can eliminate some of it, kind of essentially what's going on there. So the reason I did this at this time is because I needed a way to motivate myself to get in and see what I needed to. Number one, I needed to refresh myself concerning my footnotes, because remember, I was picking up on writing this paper in October. So I needed to refresh myself on the footnotes. I needed to evaluate what the footnotes were doing, and basically I just needed to motivate myself. And I have done a lot more, and this is a shorter video, so it's like maybe I should continue and show you the other stuff I got. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do it. I've made a lot of changes, so let's pull up the paper as it is. I'm going to pause this for a minute and get me some water. I'll be right back. Yeah, I forgot to tell you that my headset had broke, but I just got another one, a new one. I'm kind of hard on headsets, but that's what I use because that's what my mic's built in. So, as far as I know, my voice is working fine. I did test it before I started this video. Okay, I totally changed the introduction, and I'm probably going to change the introduction again. But let me just show you what I have, and let me tell you the rationale for why I went with this. One helpful tool for analyzing a biblical passage is what some call the 3 tenets of salvation chart, or the 3 aspects of sanctification chart. And so you see my number 1, right? And I'll go down in the footnote and talk about that in a minute. Dr. Bing, Charlie Bing, has written a book that utilizes the chart to interpret difficult biblical Bible passages. He labels the first and second column A truth and B truth, respectively. I know there's spelling errors. I'll fix those later. Even though Bing does not label a third column, it could be called C truth for glorification. Many Christians favor the A truth over B truth. Interpretation should be, I'll insert that now, over the B truth, because they often have never heard the B truth interpretation. Once they do, it often causes a paradigm shift and makes them more likely to take the B truth interpretation more often. This paper considers the A truth interpretation of 1 Corinthians 15, but argues for a B truth interpretation. Now, the whole reason that I went to the A truth versus B truth is because I didn't want the paper to just use the term Calvinistic. But not everybody that takes a truth interpretation of a passage is Calvinistic. And so it's like, it's like, I'm gonna have to think about that. Do I really want to use the A truth B truth thing? And if I don't, then that's going to affect my opening as well. So I don't know. I'm still thinking about that. So the order of presentation will be to answer the following interpretive questions. First, are the passages written to believers? What does save mean in the passage? What does gospel mean? What does receive mean? What does stand mean? What does hold fast mean? What does the conditional clause mean? What does it mean to believe? What does believe in vain mean? Finally, what is the purpose of the passage? So here, I like this footnote. An early articulation of 3:10 salvation occurs in the Schofield Study Bible, right? We talked about that. And I said, and then I say, an early articulation of 3 aspects of sanctification occurs in Schaeffer's major Bible themes. And then I say right here, the earliest articulation may have been when Luther said, simul istus et peccator. And I don't know Latin, guys, so forgive me if I didn't say it right. And then I say, quote, being. Now, I did trace down the resource where this is quoted, and far as my friends from seminary, because I tried looking online and I couldn't find it. And I'll tell y'all this, that this is in Luther's commentary on Romans underneath verse 725, I think. And the version that they have is by J. Theodore Muller, and that's not in Logos, so that's unfortunate to have. And I may try to, I could just quote that, as a book quote. I tend to like using electronic things because I leave the hyperlinks in. So even though I'll take out the blue, like right here, I'll take out the underline, and I'll take out the blue color. This is still here. So my professor has Logos. He just clicks on it and it takes him right there, And my professors do have Logos, so I like doing that. But yeah, so I'll keep this for right now. Now, the other thing that I notice is when I'm quoting Bing here, there's no page numbers here. And that's what happens whenever you're dealing with a Faith Life ebook. So when you go to here, see, it says ebook. It doesn't say Logos. So let me show you the difference here. Let me just pull up, let's try this, Life and Letters of Martin Luther. Just see, Logos Research Edition. That means everything's tagged, the page numbers show up and all of that. But in the ebook versions, they haven't gotten around to doing that yet. It hasn't, it's available through Faith Life ebooks or other things like that, but it isn't all souped up as the Logos Research Edition would be. That's fine. I have it in Kindle, and I can use the Kindle pages for that and everything. So I'll insert those later on. Okay. Moving forward. Are these passages written to believers, or is this a rhetorical convention? So I say, does 1 Corinthians teach one has to continue to believe and behave in harmony with the gospel and prove one's truly saved? Yes, if this is a truth, and no, if this is a B truth. So this is a combination of my original opening and my new opening, but it seems out of place here, honestly. A truth may take this passage as a warning for an unbeliever who's never believed the gospel. And I say may take, but yeah, I mean, as much as I like the A truth thing, let me see how Bing says it. A truth interpretation: a person must persevere in the faith to be saved. See, that's confusing because it's like, wait a minute, is that Arminian or is that Calvinist? B truth: a person must persevere in the faith to experience the full benefit of the new life provided in the gospel. So, I mean, I like the A truth stuff, but I use the language different than being in some places. And nothing against y'all Calvinists, but I think I'm just going to have to use the term Calvinist in here and just use and make a footnote saying, address the Arminians later on. So okay, I made that decision. But I'll still read this for now because a lot of this is similar. I have moved some things around so you get a different flow versus the other video. For example, Nasali. Now, one thing I did do in this version is I started putting the names of the commentators in, so that it just is easier to follow. But anyway, let's see. For example, Nasali argues that if the Corinthians do not persevere in the gospel, it means they believed in vain because they did not have genuine belief. In a footnote for this passage, he appeals to Andrew Wilson's 2017 doctrinal dissertation on the warning assurance relationship 1 Corinthians to argue that God leaves a believer unsure of one's salvation to motivate service to him. So you see, I've kind of combined several different footnotes here. So I say some A-truth interpreters, because what I did was every time I used the word Calvinist, I typed in the word A-truth interpreters, inserted that in there instead. Some A-truth interpreters are not as upfront about their view of the original audience. Schreiner initially describes the Corinthians as having been saved and standing in the gospel. Then he says that final salvation will not come without perseverance. But it is his comment on 8:11 that includes an argument that is currently being used against free grace interpretation. He argues that Paul is speaking like a pastor would to a congregation, that he has no way of telling whether they are saved or not. So he addresses them based on their appearance to be Christians. This claim to phenomenological language appears to be a rescue device. Even more than that, it is a non-falsifiable argument. It cannot be demonstrated false when they counter that the free grace proponents claim that the biblical text identifies these audiences, believers, brethren, and other related terms. The A-truth interpreter claims that the Bible addresses every audience as if they're already saved as a rhetorical preaching convention. They argue that as preachers talk to their audience as brethren, but know that everybody in the audience is not saved, the Bible also addresses everyone as believers. So I'm seeing some roughness, I'm seeing some redundancy and stuff, and so I'm like, it's okay. I can condense that, and that's what reading out loud does. It's like it helps with flow. It helps you think about what you can reduce, what you need to clarify. D.A. Carson's work probably inspired the approach in 1992 titled Reflection on Christian Assurance, which is often quoted by recent Reformed commentaries. The article counters the Grace Evangelical Society's interpretation. In 1993, Zane Hodges responded to Carson's article in a series titled The Near Puritanism. Jody Dillow of the Free Grace Alliance also exposes the presupposition of Carson in the chapter Defense of Free Grace. Recently, free grace interpretation scripture have been accused of not being falsifiable. The A-truther argues that the free grace proponent can just move any passage to the experiential column to support a system. One counter to the charge is that the A-truther can also choose to ignore passages about experiential sanctification. But the best response to the A-truther is to remind them that if in their system that it's not falsifiable, if they wave away free grace interpretations by using the phenomenological argument mentioned above. So when I have a statement like mentioned above, it's like, wait a minute, can't I just bring all this together and simplify this, reduce it? This had to be said lest the free grace position is shown from the text and then merely dismissed with a claim there's no evidence that they're saved. All right, so I kind of go through here. I don't think much is different. Yeah, there is some few things I want to mention. I brought in some of these arguments. Saying Corinthians, Paul does mention it has been in danger of false brethren. These brethren refer to infiltrators, probably paid Jews or Romans to inform or set up Paul. Paul first mentions false brethren in Galatians 2, and they were the ones that were teaching circumcision as a requirement of salvation. They were probably Jews from Jerusalem pretending to be Christians. So I got a couple resources there and different views on that. I say, but Paul does not appear to allow this threat of infiltrators to affect how he addresses his audience. It is true that a person can only know they're saved because they believe the gospel. The same person cannot for sure know that another person is saved, but the Christian should accept that person in faith that says they believe the gospel. In 11:13 through 15, Paul also mentions false apostles and deceitful workers, but he never says they are not saved. This would have been a perfect opportunity to expose them as non-Christians. He could have said, do not listen to these false Christians. But again, the situation is not exactly the same. So one should not necessarily, it should not be necessarily read it back into First Corinthians. A couple other things is in the midst of this, I do talk about Constable's interpretation in some of these passages. And so the part about the invoking the 3-10 salvation, if I have that up front in the paper, then I move it around. Let's see if there's anything here. Constable seems to take positional. Okay. Yeah, I clearly see where I need to do some more work, and at least now you know my rationale. So if y'all think, oh man, you wrote a hit piece against Calvinists, no, it's not that. I need to just narrow the scope of my paper, because originally it was like I'm going to examine the paper through the 3 tenths of salvation chart and deal with all the different sociological views for that. But that's too large of a paper, you know. I need to cut this thing down a whole lot. So I removed a lot of the conditional stuff. All right, so the last thing I want to show you, I've kind of showed in other videos, but I just want you to know about this resource, the word rake. Now, it's not going to show all the results because I haven't used Grammarly to correct my spelling, and I haven't used the built-in editor that's in Word. But this will still give you an idea what word rake does. So brevity and simplicity. This program is made by lawyers, or at least informed by lawyers, to make things more concise. So watch this, guys. This is automatic. Doesn't mean you always agree with them. And what we'll do is we'll look at some of the options that WordRake made and, you know, consider, well, was it a good choice or not? It'll be done in a minute. And what's interesting is when Grammarly and WordRake fight, you know, because WordRake will eliminate certain things, and Grammarly's like, no, you need those in there. And so I tend to go with Grammarly unless like shortening my papers to my main priority, making my arguments more concise. Whenever I'm trying to make things clear, I use the Hemingway editor, and I guess I could show y'all that. I'll probably show y'all that in another video. All right, so they don't like aspects, they like parts. I like aspects, so I'll keep it, reject, and go to next. But it's written a book that uses the chart. They don't like utilizes, they rather like uses. I like utilizes, so I'll reject it that time. What does believe in vain mean? So we got some redundancy. So let me just accept and go to next. Does Freddy's teach that one has to? Instead, they like must, which I like. It's better. They don't like truly say, but I do use it, even though I can't stand that argument. But because whenever you're talking to somebody, I mean, especially somebody that's not free grace, you kind of have to use their language, at least initially. Okay. That includes an argument that is currently being used. They say you don't need that is, so I'll take it out. They like taking that's out. I'll accept now, even though this claim to phenomenal language appears to be a rescue device. I like the appearance because of the language of appearance I think I used before. I'll keep it. Even more than that, so even more. It cannot be demonstrated. It cannot be shown false when the counter. I'm gonna reject that one. A truther can also, instead of choose to ignore, just ignore. All right. I'm just going through and getting the that's merely appear to be sons of light. Reject. I'm going to use it. All right. Whoa. They made lots of changes here. Paul does not appear to allow the threat of infiltrators to affect. They don't like the term infiltrator. They take it out. Paul does not seem to let this threat affect how he talks to his audience. But it doesn't specify what the threat is. I'll agree with them on this, but I'm going to insert infiltrator back in. You don't need the word the same, exactly the same, so I can skip that. No, it's not changing because we're talking about. There's another program that I've used in the past. It's called Pro Writing Aid, which it's good. I just can't afford it. And there's a free program called Slick Write that's online. Reject. Accept. Reject. Reject. Accept. Reject. As they reject. Accept. Reject. 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 I'll keep that for now. Reject. Reject. It sees the word modifying, but I'm talking about grammatically modifying, and they're saying changing, and that's not what modifying means. It basically means adding to, describing, clarifies. Reject. Reject. So got lots of redundancy I'm gonna have to deal with. All right. All right. So yeah, you get an idea about how that particular program works. I like it. It helps. But I use Grammarly first, and then I go through and use that to make things more concise. So anyway, this video has helped me to see what I need to cut down on, make things more concise. So yeah, hopefully you can see, you got to make decisions, and sometimes that's tough. It's like you want to be creative, but you have a page limit, you have a time limit, you have a scope limit, and so you just got to make the best decision based off of that. So anyway, if you're blessed by this video, subscribe, hit the bell to get notifications so that you don't miss on future content. Like it to help with the algorithm by giving us a thumbs up. Share it with others so they could be blessed. And please keep this ministry in prayer most of all. Also, if you would like to donate, the PayPal link will be underneath most videos for that. And I think it's underneath the About section of my channel. God bless.